Hey, I'm David Childs, this is David Lillard, and we want to welcome you to Spartan Pro Day, where you come to grow personally, grow professionally, and make a difference. We've got some really good content lined up for you. We've got speakers like Mick Mixon, Dusty Holcomb, Abby Donnelly. We've got a lot of folks, a lot of content, some good panels, some good presentations, and some really good conversations. We're so thrilled to have you on board here, and I want to turn it over to David.
Yeah, things look different this year. Obviously, we're not live together like we'd like to be, but we're coming to you through the Wecome platform. And through that platform, you have all these exciting opportunities to engage with one another, to engage with sponsors, to engage with speakers. And at the end of the entire series, you're going to actually have an opportunity to win some prizes. And the way that you do that is by engaging. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Before we get started with our first session, one of the first things we want to do is thank some of our sponsors, and we have some fantastic people who have made this event possible. It's coming to you free over the next 3 weeks because of these companies. And so, of course, Spartan Planning and Spartan Branding are part of this, but we also have Blueprint Investment Partners who have been a huge part of what we've been doing. C12, who has been a huge supporter these last couple of years. And we even have a couple of extra sponsors, a couple of new sponsors this year, Euro House and Polished Concrete Professionals. And so we're just so thankful for all of these organizations who have poured into Spartan Pro Day and made it what it is. Before we go any further, we want you to hear a message from one of our sponsors.
There's nothing significant about a table. It's what happens around a table that gives it purpose.
An invitation to a C12 table means you don't have to sit alone.
You work alongside other leaders, pursuing the same goals, the same calling, the same significance.
For over 25 years, thousands of Christian business leaders have experienced the transformative power of gathering with peers around a C12 table.
Grounded in biblical truth and the proven business resources C12 provides,
The experience, advice, and wisdom of others brings about action.
Action produces results, and results matter.
but true success is more than what's measured on the bottom line.
The impact of a successful, God-honoring business can truly transform the marketplace.
Use the platform God has given you to change the world.
There's a seat at the table for you.
All right, before we get into this great content, I just want to walk you through the schedule for the next 3 weeks. This is week 1 and session 1 of Spartan Pro Day. And so we're going to go today from 9 till about 11:30. And then we're going to come back on October 28th. So 1 week from today, we're going to be premiering again at 9 a.m., go to about 11:30. And then the final week, November 4th, same thing. So we have it 3 straight Wednesdays with the content from 9 to 11:30. And now David's going to introduce our very first session we're excited to bring to you.
Yeah, thanks. And before I introduce the panel, I wanted to remind you that we're going to have live Q&A with a number of our panelists and speakers at the end of each of these week's sessions. So make sure and stay tuned. There will be a different session. It'll all be explained to you. Just wanted to let you know you do get some live participation with our presenters. And so now to introduce the panel. So we've got a great panel here of business leaders and organization leaders that are really making a difference in the community. And it's moderated by none other than Mick Mixon, the voice of the Carolina Panthers. He's got a much better voice than I do. Take it away, Mick.
It's a fantastic topic. How in the world do we go about not just surviving, but thriving in uncertain times? As your humble moderator, I have no idea. Fortunately, we have a panel lined up of experts at the very tops of their games, and this is going to be fun to tap into their vast knowledge. So let me introduce everybody. First, Dusty Holcomb is the head of innovation at AAA. Welcome, Dusty. Great seeing you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, to Dusty's right, we have Tim Lowe, who's the president of Lowe's Foods. Good seeing you, Tim.
Good seeing you, Mick. Thanks.
All right, and then we have Myron Wilkins, who is the executive director of Greensboro Urban Ministries.
Thank you.
How are you, Myron?
Doing great. Thanks, Mick.
Fantastic seeing all of you. Dusty, let's start with you. How do you go about, especially since no one could have seen this coming, we've never been here before, how do you go about building an organization that is robust enough to handle and then actually thrive in times like these?
Mick, it's a great question, and I really don't know that it's any different than what you do at any other time, whether it's craziness or not. It is have an organization that's focused on what matters and relentlessly focused on what matters and letting the other things fall to the wayside. And so when you have an organization that is attuned to that, then the uncertainty and the craziness of the times actually are great clarifiers and allow you to crystallize and distill even further. So that's my initial reaction. Is it's not about changing what you do because the times are crazy. It's about getting even more focused when the craziness happens. And if you've done that ahead of time, then you're building an organization that's going to be sustainable.
We'll get into what some of those clarifiers are in a second. Tim, what about you? How did Lowe's position itself to try to handle all this?
Yeah, one of the first and foremost things we looked at was really the safety of our folks first. That's always paramount. And so the safety of our folks as well as the safety of our community. We provide a service of food back to the communities, and if you want to see a community in turmoil, cut off the food supply, and that is something that we take very seriously. And so for us, it's something that as we kind of stepped into this, we always say that the bright lights kind of show what's been happening over the training time frame before, right? So whether you're a fighter or a football player or whatever it may be. And so for us, we have been really kind of practicing very diligently over the last few years on how to flex the muscle of change and how to flex the muscle of really being adaptable. We've gone through a lot of changes in our organization over the last few years, and so what this allowed us to do is to be able to take those learnings that we had and kind of put it on steroids. Just a quick way to put it in perspective, some of the things that we had projected for our business of where we would be 6 years from now, we had to adapt and change and get there in 6 weeks. That's a Herculean task, but again, just thanks to the people that we have, and again, we focus on their safety so they can focus on the community and keeping the food supply moving.
Myron, what about you in Greensboro Urban Ministries?
We work on the front lines, and when this all hit, we were automatically told that you all are essential workers. You need to be there, and it's great that we have an incredible team of folks that serve with us. Unlike many nonprofit businesses, many of the people who work with us, certainly they want to get paid, and if we stop paying them, they may stop showing up. But they're there also for a sense of calling. And so basically what we did was we called upon those and said, look, people in this community are going to need us more than ever, and we need to be willing to be flexible. And so we began to adjust and adapt, and every day was a new adventure, and it continues to be. But we remain flexible enough to meet the demands, but also firm enough to know that we need to keep our pipelines of food and shelter and other help open to people, because there are people who in the past have never experienced being without, or you have people for the first time experiencing not being able to pay their rent, and we become their front line, and we've had to adjust to be able to respond to those changing needs.
So Tim and Dusty might celebrate an increase in business. Would it be accurate to say that in your line of work, new customers aren't something that you look forward to necessarily, but that you've had to open your doors even wider because of what we're going through?
Absolutely. We've had, when I was heading over to be part of this panel, I was leaving out of my office, there were over 50 people lined up at our front door going around our building. Many of them are folks that have briefcases and shirts and ties for the first time needing to come someplace for help. So while we hate the reality of more people coming, we also are thankful that because of the generosity of this community, that we're able to respond to those needs. And people know when they come to us, that's a place where they'll get some answer and some help.
Myron, have you had to figure out new ways to do business and be successful?
One of the big things has been generally when people have come to us for help, we have a large lobby and they come in and sit. Because of COVID and social distancing, we can't have people in the physical lobby, so we've had to adjust by allowing people to line up outside. And one of the things we're doing in response to that, because we thought that probably, like many people, that in March, probably June or July, this will all be over and we'll be back to normal. But now as we get into the colder months and North Carolina weather shifts, we can't have people staying outside in the winter. And so what we're doing now is that we've had to adjust, and we're going to be building a walkway outside and redesigning our front of our building so that we can serve individuals and families in a way that's safe, that protects them, but doesn't deter them from coming for help because of concern of social distancing and other challenges.
Well said. Tim, in Lowe's Foods, have you guys had to do the same thing, figure out new and different ways to get people the groceries and the services they need?
Yeah, if you look at those where the folks that were hit the hardest whenever kind of COVID comes along, think of those that are, have special needs within their communities, within their households that they have, and also think about, individuals that may be, over the age of 60, 65, 70, and they may even have, multiple factors that make them more susceptible, to COVID. We've had to go through and we've adapted by, putting things, for example, in place like specific senior as well as those in needs shopping hours that really kind of help protect and minimize the number of people in our stores. We've done things like limit the number of people actually in our stores. We've actually went through and put markings on the floor to help people understand, how to stay. What does 6 feet apart really mean within their environment, and trying to make it easy too. I mean, for us, we came up with a little saying that says 2 carts apart warms the heart. Because again, just a kind of a reminder, just say, hey, just if you're in question, just think about 2 shopping carts and just stay that distance away from others to really kind of help kind of go through and really kind of surface through that. But it's one for us that we saw an incredible spike in our e-commerce business, obviously, and then as well as our direct to delivery to home, as well as curbside pickup. The industry as a whole kind of had seen that. The one thing we had to our fortune, we've been in what they call the click and collect or e-commerce business, since the 90s, and so we were a little bit more mature than most grocery retailers that had not went into that space. Allowed us to respond a little bit better with that, and we really took a particular focus towards our elderly and those in need, those maybe immunocompromised, to really kind of help them, to protect them, to be able to go through and be able to get the groceries and supplies that they needed. In fact, I can't tell you the number of people that we had, because obviously even in our offices we had to take and find ways to go remote. So we took our entire call center and literally within a matter of 3 days set them up to go entirely remote so they could work at home. And one of the main things that they did was take phone calls from those who didn't understand exactly know how to use the technology to be able to order online, and just the care that we saw come from our hosts and from our folks back to our community to walk folks through it and actually place their orders for them and get it to where they could get the supplies they needed and still be safe.
I'm guessing Dusty and Myron to back me up on this. Every Lowe's Foods my wife and I have ever been in, we've been met with relentlessly friendly employees. I mean, we've never not been treated in a first-class way. So what were the steps you guys took to make sure that those employees felt safe in the workplace so that your customers could then feel good?
Yeah, absolutely. And a great question, because again, if you look at our priorities well before COVID, our first priority has always been safety. Again, we deal with food products. With food products, if we don't do it right, you could hurt someone, you could even kill someone if not done properly. So we take it very, very seriously on how we go about that. And our hosts, again, protecting them and knowing that they were on the front lines, very much, the same thing, Myron, like you were talking about as well. You've got a bigger calling, that's out there that, you had the community of volunteers coming in to help. In our team, we saw a very similar thing. They felt very much a commitment back that they needed to be there to serve the community. So for us, we went through and we invested in many different things. We put up, plexiglass shields in our stores. We provided face masks, face coverings. We even brought in a company, they call it Germ Doctor, that they come through to where they actually clean our stores on a regular basis and actually put down antiviral, antibacterial products down to actually protect the community, protect our hosts throughout it. We track COVID testing. We monitor, distance apart, how we schedule people. We've literally invested millions back in our business to go through and protect our hosts. And then if someone within our community of hosts actually became ill, we actually pay them to actually be at home and recover and not have to worry about things. I mean, so it's that type of stuff for us, is that, we're a local Carolinas company, born and bred right here. And for us, this isn't just a business, this is our home. This is our community, and whether it's supporting folks where we're actually doing food drives to help folks to be able to go through and be able to provide for those in need, or whether it's being able to provide food for those who coming in that can actually purchase it, we consider that our responsibility and our duty, and our people we have to protect to be able to do that.
AAA is an amazing business. From when I was a little kid, you got your little maps and Dad, Stuckey's, Dad, 3 miles, Stuckey's. And now it's amazing. Car service centers and a vast network of other things that AAA offers, insurance, that kind of thing. So how's it been, Dusty? What have you guys had to do with, I'm guessing less people flying, so more people are on your doorstep for certain other things.
Yeah, it's been unprecedented. It's been really interesting. So, Tim, you said something a minute ago where it was, you had a 6-year plan and you got it deployed now. And, we experienced a lot of that as well with call centers. We still have all of our call centers completely displaced. And we're a 24/7, 365 emergency response operations organization at the core of what we do. And so we were able to deploy all of our emergency response folks in the call centers within 10 days, but out to their homes and do things like that. The businesses, because we're pretty well diversified, our emergency road service business and our core membership, like many folks, March and April was just sort of gone, right? Nobody was driving anywhere, nobody was traveling. A little different than food, a little different than people needing emergency supplies. Nobody was riding anywhere in a car. So our emergency response was down 30 and 40 points in the amount of vehicles we were normally servicing or rescuing off the side of the road. Those miles driven also meant that people weren't getting in car wrecks. So our insurance business, the loss ratios went down tremendously. In fact, we gave back millions and millions of dollars through rebates to our customers on the insurance side and rebated premium because of the loss ratio improvements. The travel business, like all of us, already know, travel is gone, right? We're at 15% of where we were this time last year. It will come back. We can already start to see that the commercial and leisure travel is starting to come back. People are going stark raving mad, being stir crazy in their homes. And what really has been intriguing to watch this year is the resurgence of the Great American Road Trip, where hey, they pull out the trip ticker, the map, and we're going on a car ride. And I have in my head anyway this image of a bunch of youngins in the back of a station wagon, going down to Disney World, or not Disney World in this case, going to Wally World or somewhere like that. And we've seen a lot of that this year. Camping and RVing and all of those things have been tremendous increases, because what people have said is, we don't want to just be home, but we need to get out, we need to see. So we've seen a lot of that, and it all across all of our businesses, the travel's the only one that has been financially impacted tremendously in a negative way. Everything else, our membership has grown and exceeded last year's growth, because more people are saying, hey, I'm going to be on the road, I need to make sure I have AAA. Our automotive repair centers are back to pre-COVID levels, so we're fixing cars like we were a year ago. And that really speaks for us and the way we think about our business. It speaks to our ability to take care of our members, and we're an incredibly member-centric organization. Everything we do is for our members. So for us, when we started our initial COVID response, it was, how do we keep our team members safe, and how do we keep our members safe? And everything else, as long as it falls under those two things, that we will not make a bad decision. We're going to do those two things, and I'm very happy to say that we've been able to do that all the way through.
So I got to make sure I understand everything you said. So you restructured your call centers?
Yes.
Where the call center monitors are no longer in the call center?
Yeah, all of our call center personnel, in fact, all of our non-member facing personnel across our entire organization, we have almost 10,000 employees, are all remote.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was quite a Herculean effort to get everybody out.
Yeah, no question. Tim, how'd your supply lines hold up? Were there stresses internally for you guys with, because if the pandemic hasn't taught us anything, it's that scarcity breeds momentum. If you can't get hand sanitizer and paper products, right, it makes you want them more.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned about that supply chain. The one thing I'll just comment, real quickly, we sold, in the first 7 days of the pandemic, we sold enough toilet paper basically to stretch from here to California and back. And that's not even an exaggeration. And we could have sold 3 times that amount. And so why people had so much toilet paper is just crazy. The supply chain was very interesting. In the food supply chain, there's 2 very distinct, different supply chains. One services kind of food service, restaurants, that mechanism. The other services, kind of what consumer packaged goods or, things that we would deal directly to consumer. And so that's what comes into us. So imagine, for example, in restaurants, they buy eggs, like, for example, they'll buy 144 eggs at a time that comes in a box that they receive in. Well, that does me no good. I can't sell you 144 eggs. So what happens on one side of the supply chain, there is this product that's pent up, and there is no outlet for it because, again, restaurants and those kind of things are not functioning in their normal capacities. On the flip side, we have a high demand. I need those eggs. I need those kind of things, but I don't have the packaging and stuff to kind of go through and service it. The good thing is that we were able to work back through with a great amount of success with local, state. Lawmakers and federal lawmakers to go through and actually change the law so we could actually provide the food to the folks who need it. For instance, if you come in to buy a dozen eggs from any grocery store, there's tracking on those eggs, so we know exactly where they're from, what lot they're from, the whole 9 yards on it. So and that packaging is all printed as such, et cetera, and so on. If I get 144 dozen and I repackage them into a 12-count egg package to be able to sell to you, which we did after the laws were changed to allow us to do that, then we're spending a lot more labor and stuff to do it, but I can't have the same traceability. So there was such a need that the risk, that we would normally not take as an industry, we had to go through and make some modifications because the need was so much greater. And without those type of things as well, we wouldn't be able to provide, to folks like Myron and his team as well, to be able to go through and provide and just getting the product kind of through. We literally, even to this day, we have thousands of items within the food industry that are still not shipping or on allocation, and they're telling us it'll be into next year before some of these will get caught up.
What are some of those items?
Obviously, number one is toilet paper and paper products. Cleaning supplies, obviously was a big thing, and specifically within cleaning supplies, we can now get things like Clorox and bleach, those basics, but sandy wipes, those things are continue to be under high stress and high pressure. Oddly enough, too, there's a lot of basic commodities. If you walk up and down the aisles of your grocery store and you see out of stocks, whether they're canned products, you would think like a Bush's baked bean, for example, or something like that. It's surprising because what happens is, in their areas, what they had is they had the beans in the field, for instance, but they didn't have the folks to go harvest the beans. And then they had to take them to the supplier house to be able to go through and process them and put them into cans. They were having problems with outbreaks of COVID within a lot of the plants, and so therefore they couldn't have the people, and there were people that were scared. I mean, the whole community was scared. And so what happened, it wasn't that there was necessarily a scarcity of product, it was a scarcity of being able to move the product throughout the entire ecosystem to get it to the grocers so that we could get it to the community.
I had no idea our eggs were being traced. You know that, Myron?
I didn't know.
My gosh, I know.
That's how I eat now.
Yeah, it's actually a good
about that egg salad sandwich from here on out, but it's fascinating. All right, here's what I think that that our audience wants to hear from you three experts, and that is, what are some ideas? So when you each of you have had to adapt and recalibrate to thrive in these uncertain times, how will you be changed once we get back to a, quote, new normal? What are some of the things you think might stick in the post-COVID era world?
Well, I know for us, one of our big services that we offer is homeless services. People who experience homelessness, they need a place to call home for a while. We had a shelter that housed 100 men and women every night in large settings. I think that's gone away. We've had to adjust. We've had to reduce our number of people we help in shelter. And the way we've innovated around that is that we found also there were a lot of hotels in our community who had empty rooms. And so now we contract with hotels for people to have individual rooms because the reality of having lots of people in large rooms, even if we may get back to some level of normalcy, it still makes sense to care for people. And also we're finding that people thrive better when they are not in a large setting, and so we're better able to help, and we're seeing people move more quickly out of shelters into homelessness because they're able to have their own room, their own space, and we're able to work with them in a more effective way.
Nice. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, it's interesting just how quickly human behavior has truly changed. If you think about the ecosystem of the way we as a community have lived, we typically live in tribes. Of how we function. There's the tribal folks we hang out at work. There's our tribes within our families. There's tribes within our churches and our communities and different places like that. There's been a great disruption of those tribes, and so what we're seeing is that there's a high desire to really want to come back together. But at the same token, there's such caution. So, for example, there's many companies that are going through today and saying, the workers where we can have that can work from home, they'll continue to work from home, and then even post-COVID, that they'll continue that sequence. So therefore, the tribes they used to hang with within the certain communities is going to change. It's going to morph. It will be different. So regardless of what business you're in, whether you're selling groceries or you're AAA or whatever you may be, you're going to have to go through and think differently about how you build community within your organization. How do you build culture within it? Because culture is important. There's an old saying that says, that culture can eat strategy for lunch. And so businesses that don't morph and change their culture to be able to embrace these new concerns and these new ways of going to business are going to struggle. The thing we see with that within our industry, for example, that folks may not think about food usage occasions. If I'm at work, then my snacking occasions are usually happening at work. My lunch occasions are happening at work. So I'm either remote, picking up something for lunch, or I'm bringing my lunch with me, or I'm purchasing something at the office where I'm at, or out of a snack machine. In the future, if those folks are working from home, those usage occasions will not happen, at work. So therefore, the suppliers who supply those goods and services, those companies are going to have to change and morph how they do business. The people who build, buildings that house large quantities of people, for corporate headquarters. A lot of them are saying, hey, we're going to allow permanent, work from home. That's going to disrupt that particular industry. And then there's this, on the flip side, you have the surgence of folks like online purveyors. We all know of Amazon and Walmart Plus and all the different folks that are out there that are playing in that space. And that's where we're seeing, for example, the abandonment of malls. But yet, at the same token, we're hearing that's opportunity where folks like Amazon are coming in, they're purchasing malls and turning them into totally different ecosystems. So I think post-COVID, the thing that we thought, again, and I mentioned this earlier, the thing where we thought we would be 6, 8, 10 years from now, we're going to find out that we'll be there just a series of months from now, and therefore there'll be quite a disruption of people's ecosystems as they move forward.
He's got good sayings. Have you noticed that?
I wish I had my pen and paper.
Carts, 2 carts apart for
apart.
a happy heart.
Warms the heart.
Warms the heart.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, Dusty, what are you thinking?
I couldn't agree more with what you just said about culture and how companies can intentionally curate their culture in a remote and on-premise environment. It's going to be different. We've never faced that challenge at a scaled level the way we're going to. I think that the impact and influence of technology is going to continue to be tremendous. I couldn't agree more that we're not going to be bringing people back to a corporate headquarters for daily 40-hour work weeks. It's going to be remote work. And technology has enabled that. I mean, how many people had spent many hours on Zoom or Teams or any of those platforms prior to March of this year, and now it's all we spend our time on. So what's happening and what we're seeing is it's not just impacting the way people work together, it's impacting the way customers expect to be engaged with. And we've long believed that your competition has nothing to do with the products and services you sell. Your competition has everything to do with those organizations who are raising the bar for the customer. They're raising the experience level. And so like right now, Amazon Prime Day is going on. Amazon has shifted the way consumers expect to be delivered to with an experience perspective. So I think that the way companies are going to thrive going forward is they're going to say, hey, we communicate this way via Teams, via Zoom, whatever the platform is. How do we engage our customers that way? Because our customers are going to expect that. And for example, we're seeing that now with our travel agents. We're not putting travel agents back in branches. We're instead letting people who do want to travel, they're doing virtual sessions with travel agents, and they're able to talk to a person on their terms and their way via their engagement mechanism. I don't think that ever goes back. I think people are going to continue to expect an experience that's going to be elevated and changed forever because of the technology we're using right now.
Dusty, it's interesting how you talk about the technology as well. I mean, because we talk about the integration of culture and technology. At our offices, and I'm sure most all of us do, similar things. Whether we meet together to have ugly sweater day or funky socks day or whatever it may be. Well, it's a lot more difficult to create an environment of fun whenever you're doing everything remotely on Zoom. One of the things that we actually did is actually, oddly enough, I'd gotten me a helmet. It's a Spartan helmet, oddly enough. So that we went through and we had, and so I came up with this idea. My wife was saying, "Well, you got this helmet." I said, "Well, it's a display piece. It's just more for motivation and to look at, and it's not really to wear." She goes, "But wouldn't it be cool to wear it?" And I'm like, "Well, how could I ever just wear a Spartan helmet?" So we came up with this idea, and so what we did for one of our Zoom meetings, so we had almost 200 people on the Zoom call, and what we did is we have wear your favorite head covering day. So something you could see on the Zoom environment, and we had everybody said, "Be prepared to turn on your camera and show your favorite head covering." And so, I mean, everybody wore everything from their favorite ball caps to their favorite derby to, we had one guy who had a stuffed chicken that was sitting in a chicken rotisserie thing sitting on his head to, I was able to bring my Spartan helmet, to work. So it gave an idea, opportunity to even take the technology that you're speaking of and integrate, culture, back into it, because we also understand if we can't keep the workforce, in tune, how are they going to be able to take care of the frontline folks who really need our help? Again, whether it's going through the services that you provide, or through AAA, or through providing food services, we've got to have, again, the culture, keep it migrated and pulled together in a tight way, using technology to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I want to add one more thing onto there. I think that going forward, leadership is going to be effective leadership is going to require so much more intentionality than it does. You can't happen by accident. You're not going to have a passing in the hall and the quick conversation. You've got to be very intentional about how you set up conversations, how you curate conversations. One of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about is how is innovation going to work when you're never actually in the room with the person on the whiteboard, or going, "Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?" It'll still happen, but it's going to have to happen much differently, and you have to be even more intentional and specific in how you prescribe those solutions.
It's a fantastic set of topics, and we could turn this into an all-nighter probably, but I suspect we need to figure out a place to land this. So here's what I want to do. I love stories and I love heroes. So what I want each of you to do, I'm not going to call on you. So I want the first person who thinks of one to jump in, and then we'll flesh in. But I promise you, each of you have a COVID hero. Who's somebody, a customer, an employee, somebody who's touched your emotions with what they've been able to do during these times?
I've got one on top of my head, so I'm going to go ahead and jump. And it's not a person, but it's an entire team. So at AAA, we've been longtime sponsors of and supporters of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And I serve on the board for the Make-A-Wish Foundation in Western Central North Carolina. And like many organizations, like I'm sure yours, Myron, donations are down. The ability to give has been impacted just through the economy. But on the receiving end for Make-A-Wish, the wishes that were in the pipeline, so many of them are travel-based, so many of them are Disney World. And we're talking about a constituency that is at risk from a health perspective. So wishes still needed to be granted, timeliness still mattered, but we weren't. They're not able to be granted right now. You can't get on an airplane. You can't do these things. So while Make-A-Wish has done a phenomenal job of pivoting wishes, one of the things that I was so incredibly proud of is our entire team at our towing facility in Charlotte really leaned in, and there was a specific wish that a young man had for a Jeep. And so we partnered with an organization that rebuilt his Jeep, and then we did an entire tow truck parade to deliver that Jeep to him in his cul-de-sac. So there's horns and sirens and lights, and so what made me just so honored to be a part of the team and just be watching this from the sidelines was the joy on our team members' face when they get out of their trucks. And we had to literally tell people, no, we've already got enough trucks in this parade. We can't have the entire fleet go visit this young man because we still have members that we have to serve on the side of the road. But everybody wanted to be part of it, and everybody wanted to be there when they handed him his keys for his truck and show that even in the face of just remarkable adversity and an inability to be normal, that the normalness of the human nature and the power of giving could still happen. And I think that it meant as much to our team members who participated as it did to the young man who received those keys.
Don't make me start crying now. There's
That's
no
great.
crying in the National Football League. That's a great story, though. You guys got something?
I think of two things come to mind. I'll blend them together so I won't take all the
Okay.
time. One is our team at Urban Ministry. Particularly, we have a team that is our emergency assistance program headed by a young woman by the name of Tyra. And when this began to change and happen, and even when a lot of things were unknown, even more than we're known now about COVID, the idea was that who's going to get it, how are you going to touch people? And I remember being in a meeting with that team, and they said, we are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that anybody comes to this door, not just to say that they would receive something, but that they would know that we care. And so I would watch out of my window, and I would see people staying outside. They'd be agitated, and I would see that team go out and just spend time talking with people, letting them know it's okay, and talking them down and giving them everything they needed. Because a lot of times when people come, they come, I need food, but most people just need a connecting point to know that they're not alone. Because for you and I, if I go outside today and my tire's flat, hopefully somebody in this room will at least give me a ride.
Dusty
I'll
will
call
try
AAA.
I know a guy.
He know a guy. But many people we serve, if a young mother comes outside and she's going to work, making minimum wage, her tire's flat. And she has to go into a jar and take out $30 to get a retread tire. And then when she gets to the end of the week, she can't pay her rent. And she comes to our office storming in. She's upset, she's angry, she wants to fight, she's crying. So people like that, just meeting them, and I've seen that over and over again during this time, those heroes just meeting people at the door and letting them know that they're not alone. The one other thing that was great, we, not too long ago, we've been challenged as far as donations, as you're talking about. A whole charity paradigm is shifted with COVID and all those things. But I was in my office, and there was someone came and said, someone wants to see you. And it was one of our folks, a former client, who had stayed in a homeless shelter. And he said, I know everybody's having a hard time, and I want to give something to help. And he had a money order that he had just gotten from the gas station for $5. And he said, I want you to use this to help. If you think about $5, today $5 may not buy a lot, but for him, that was a significant amount. And even though in his own situation, he wanted to help somebody else. So those kind of folks that are willing to give of themselves and think of others during this time, they're my heroes.
That's a tough one to follow. But Tim, do you have a COVID hero?
I do. Just a real quick backstory to it. One of the things we talk about in our company all the time is we say we don't want cold French fries. What I mean by that is a real quick story. When my son was very young, we would actually go through, and I was into childhood health, so I would take them through the local McDonald's and get French fries because they're root vegetables, right? So I want to make sure they got their vegetables. But you always have to get the French fry when it's hot, and you don't want to get them when they're cold. And you know how it is when you get them when they're hot. What you do is you take this hot French fry, and I taught them the right technique that you take the French fry out and you hold it in front of the air vent, right, and cool it down just a little bit, and then you eat it. And they taste great whenever you do that, right? And so one day I'm driving down the road. My son's about 2 years old. He's in the back, and he's sitting there with his French fry, and he's holding it in front of the air vent, and he's eating it. And I'm thinking, he's a genius, right? I've raised a very smart young man. And I looked down, and I noticed that my air vent wasn't on. And here he was holding this French fry in front of this air vent that wasn't even working. And then to top it off, about a minute or so later, I stopped and I realized I hadn't even been to McDonald's today. And so here he was with old, stale, cold French fries holding in front of an air vent that wasn't even on and eating it, but he was doing the process perfectly. And so one of the things we talk about in our organization is no cold French fries. What we don't want is we don't want people doing actions for action's sake. What we want is we want people doing actions so that they get results. One of the young ladies that comes to mind for me is our community table manager on Forest Drive, our Forest Drive store. In fact, we're having our annual meetings as we speak right now. There's a session going on. And so we were pre-recording last week, all these stories and things to share because it's all being done remotely, obviously. And this young lady, though, she as a community table manager, we had to shut down all the community type events that we were doing in our stores and that kind of stuff with interaction with food. And so she has worked every single area in our store to help and give and participate. She's even gone through and went to the actual the governor's house to be able to go through and be able to donate and spend her time there. But her deal was that she's also gone out and driven what we call cart to class, which is our ability to be able to go through and raise funds back to the local schools to help them, helping our backpack programs to be able to go through to give to the kids in need. In fact, we've raised just sharing earlier with Myron, in 3 months we raised about 74,000 bags that we donated to children in need. And folks like her are the epitome that represent exactly what we stand for. And we call her, she actually won one of our awards. We call it our Y'all Award. Of course, being from the Carolinas, Y'all is the typical term. But what it stands for is you're a local legend. And she is truly a local legend because she was one that didn't take the opportunity just to have a cold French fry moment. She looked to go through and truly be able to make a difference out there in her community.
Wow, you don't have to look very far in the media to see some of the less seemly components of the human condition, but hopefully through this panel you now know there's a ton of good out there being done, a lot of smart people staying up late, thinking, innovating, trying to figure out how to make your life better and grow their own businesses as well. Dusty, Tim, Myron, thank you guys. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mick.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, sports fans, we'd like to take a moment now to thank our group of sponsors, C12, Blueprint Investment Partners, Spartan Planning, and Spartan Branding. And now this word from one of those fine sponsors.
Peer advisory groups are a growing resource really throughout the world as more and more CEOs, business owners, leading executives have realized the potential impact of sitting at a table with a group of other similar folks that have the same kind of responsibilities, but a wide diversity of experience, functional background, technical knowledge. And so I remember when I owned a business before I got involved with C12, and it was an acquisition that I had done as a chief financial officer of that business. And I remember many times going into my office and closing the door and talking to myself. And there were times where I just knew I was brilliant. And there were other times where I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And so when I found out about C12 and had an opportunity to visit a meeting and to recognize that there were people around the table that were very experienced that I could draw on in terms of trouble spots, in terms of things that I had never faced, then to me it was almost a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I want to do that? But it does take a commitment of time, it takes a commitment of resources. And so what we have seen over the years that we've existed, almost 30 years now, is that our members find that their business performance improves, their leadership skill improves, and there are just all kinds of benefits, cultural improvement, ministry taking place within the business. That's what I would say if someone were asking why they should think about C12. Now the next question that comes to mind is what makes C12 different from all the other peer organizations that are out there, and that would be primarily our target market. So we are focused 100% on Christian business owners, CEOs, and leading executives. We call it building great businesses for a greater purpose. Almost every CEO, business owner organization that exists will tell you that they exist to help their members improve their business performance, grow their businesses, add value to their businesses. And we are also very, very focused on that factor. But we do it with somewhat of a different motive, and that is that they develop a strong platform from which to minister for Christ in the workplace. So the greater business is necessary to be able to pursue the greater purpose. So that's really what sets us apart. We are the leading resource for Christian CEOs, business owners, and executives to help them move in that direction. How we do that, that's another very valid question. we bring together about 12 non-competing owners, CEOs, leading executives in a monthly forum. So we meet for the better part of a day. It's a 7-hour meeting. It's an action-packed meeting. We look at best business practices, but again, we are different than most CEO forums in that everything that we look at is filtered through biblical truth. So we're looking at business practices that are compatible with biblical truth. So we're really trying to help our members not have to sort through the information that's out there that might be more worldly and not supportive of their faith. In that forum, C12 provides a discussion curriculum, and it addresses every facet of leadership that a person in that responsibility, that level of responsibility would have to deal with. And so 75% of our members would tell you that their leadership skills have improved from being in C12 and in being exposed to those kind of ideas on a regular basis, a regular rhythm. We also then have a one-on-one meeting with each member. So the chair of the group would meet for about an hour, hour and a half, just to be a sounding board, to go a little bit deeper, to be an accountability partner if that's what the member desires, and to just make sure that they are unpacking the materials and the topics that we've been going over, and that they're able to apply them in their business. So that's pretty much the process, the model, and again, it really works. I was a member before I became a chair, and it was extremely helpful to me in navigating the things I had to navigate. If someone is interested in C12, then the first thing to do is to contact the local chair. You can actually go to the C12 website, c12group.com, and there's a location feature there, and you can find your state. You can drill down, you can find the chairs that are present in your area. Here in the Triad, I'm the managing chair. Doug Finn Cannon is my partner. We have 5 groups of CEOs and owners that meet in the Triad, and our objective is to grow that to 8 or 9. So you can reach me at my email address, steve.andrews@c12group.com, and would love to be able to chat with you to learn more about you, your business, and whether or not C12 would be a good fit.
And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, Abby Donnelly. Abby's the president of the Leadership and Legacy Group. All right, Abby, take it away.
So 10 years ago, I noticed that the conversations I was having with my business owner clients began to change. As the baby boomers are turning 74 this year, these folks were in their late 50s and 60s. And what I recognized is that they were beginning to think about succession, and appropriately so. And so the first conversation was about, I'm starting to think about succession. I have a pretty good idea of who I want to be my successor. And I'd like to confirm with that person that they are interested. All of those things make great sense. And then what I started noticing as the conversation progressed was there would be this interesting push-pull. They confirmed the successor was interested, which was great news. And as they started to release some of the responsibility to that successor, they started pulling back. And so there was this dance that went back and forth between, I want you to take on more responsibility in the company, and then, but not that way. And then I'd like you to expand the impact that you're having, but not right now. And so that dance went back and forth. And as I noticed that and started to pay attention to what was going on, I got really curious as to what was behind all of it. So I started doing a bunch of research. And what I want to share with you today is what I found. Some of that research is information that's very well known and well understood. And some of it unfolded into the hidden aspects of succession and exit. And so that's what I'm going to walk through with you today. So what I'd like you to do is take out a pen and paper. And as I'm going through this, whether your timeline for succession is 1 year or 10 years or longer, I'd still like you to pay attention to how does this apply to me, or how can this apply to me? So as we're going through, what I'm hoping is that you will identify a couple of things that might be applicable for your business or your role, no matter what role you play in a company. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I've had the Leadership and Legacy Group since 2013. Prior to that, my career was with Sandler Training and Procter & Gamble. And I've got a background in statistics, and I'm originally from Poughkeepsie, New York. So the Leadership and Legacy Group works with business owners and senior leaders on the leadership side of succession and exit. So our focus is really developing strong leaders who can take over and run the company profitably and sustainably as the owner exits the business. We also work with folks that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that are trying to figure out what their next chapter might look like. And then we work with those owners to enhance the strategic value of their business and figure out how to have some of those difficult conversations and difficult decisions that they need to make. Now, we're in a very interesting time, as we all know. So we're all facing a massive amount of uncertainty. The pandemic is obviously a significant piece of that, but there are also all kinds of other issues that are happening around us that business owners are struggling with, and so are their employees. So whether it's the economy, whether it's racial equity, the political divisiveness with the election right around the corner, and then a shift from working from the office to working from home and schooling from home. So there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of stress, and what I learned from Spartan Planning and Branding is that uncertainty is far more stressful than a known negative outcome. And that's what we're facing right now. So most of us are looking for ways to feel more in control. A study by LinkedIn indicated that over 60% of C-suite leaders have found this to be the most challenging experience in their career. They've had to make some really difficult business decisions, and they've struggled because, quite frankly, they don't have all the answers. None of us do right now. And over 50% said that at times they doubted even their ability to lead. That's pretty unsettling. One of the common things that has shown up is something called decision fatigue. And for those of you that have studied and read about Steve Jobs, he said that decision fatigue was something he wanted to avoid. And that's why he spent the majority of his decision-making power focused on strategic decisions. And that's why he wore the same clothes every day. Not the exact same clothes, he had different outfits, of course. But he wore the same uniform every day because it was one less decision he needed to make. So while we're facing those kinds of challenges, we also recognize that business owners are getting older. The early wave of baby boomers is turning 74 this year. And so the owners are starting to think more seriously, not just about their business, but about their own health and well-being and that of their family. So the triad, you may not know this, but for those of you in the triad is the 12th in the country for aging business owners. And 8 million businesses are scheduled to change hands in the next 9 years based on those demographics. We also know that 25% of the workforce is over age 55, and 40% of the workforce in 2020 are millennials. So when you look at where those succession plans are going to lead, those successors are likely to be millennials who are eager and anxious to take over. But the problem is that 75% of the successor candidates, they're just not ready yet. They can be ready, but they're not ready yet. So there's a concept called the rolling 10 that I learned from another leader in the succession and exit space. And he talks about how business owners will often say, I'm planning on exiting my business in the next 5 to 10 years. And then you talk to them 3 to 5 years later and ask them when they're planning on exiting their business. And they say, 5 to 10 years. And then you see them 3 to 5 years later and you ask them when they're planning on exiting their business. And they say 5 to 10 years. So the time of exit is always rolling forward. This slide talks about what I hear from business owners from time to time. I should have sold 5 years ago when the economy was really strong. I'm now 70 and my business has taken a hit. It's harder to sell the business at a high valuation if it's taken a hit. At 72, I thought my business was worth $10 million, but it's not. So we know that every owner will exit their business one day. The question is, will they exit on their terms? So an interesting statistic that floored me was that 75% of business owners want to sell their business. Now, not every business owner does, but of the ones that want to sell their business, only 20% of those businesses actually sell, which means a lot of them are just shutting down and liquidating. So if you as a business owner do want to sell your business, some of the things we're going to talk about now are important for you to keep in mind and work on. So we know that selling a business is fraught with uncertainty, and we're already in uncertain times. Why is it so uncertain? Well, there are a whole host of reasons. First of all, most business owners have never sold a business before. This is their first time. It's a new experience. And we know that we don't like to have new experiences that have so much at stake when we're in our 60s or 70s. In addition to that stress and uncertainty, a sale of a business is often a very complex transaction. There are financial implications, tax implications. Nobody wants to feel like a chump. So in addition to that, there are difficult conversations that we often need to have with our direct reports and with the employees that work with us. We might even have to have difficult conversations with our family members. So there's a lot of discomfort in going through the process. It takes time, it costs money, and unfortunately there are no guarantees. Oftentimes, even until you get to that final day of closing, there are no guarantees. So let's talk about some things that we know first. We know that if you're going to sell your business, you need a qualified buyer. So the criteria in my mind that define a qualified buyer are, first, they want the business. That's a good start. Second, they can pay for it. They have the means to get the dollars to cover what you're asking for it and what they've agreed to pay for it. Now, if it's a family member or key employee, for the most part, you're likely going to have to finance the sale of that business. That may be perfectly okay. If it's not, then they have to have access to resources to get it a different way. And I have a story that was interesting a couple of years ago where I was working with a business owner who had somebody that was in the industry that had expressed interest in buying his business. And he expressed interest in selling to him, so it seemed like a perfect win-win. And when I encouraged him to find out where the money was going to come from, and he asked that question, the expected buyer came back and said, well, I'm raising money from family and friends. And when we found out how much money he was going to be actually able to raise from family and friends, it was way short of what the owner needed to even get started financing the business. So they've got to be able to pay for it. They have to be willing to pull the trigger. A lot of times we talk about things as being really exciting, and then when it gets down to the final moment where we're about to sign on the dotted line, there's a moment of panic. You've heard of cold feet related to weddings. Well, this might be cold feet related to going through with the purchase. If you get to that point, you have to know that they can run it profitably and sustainably. And so if you're financing it, that's critically important, because if you're financing it and they can't run it profitably, well, then you're going to have to come back in and take it over again or see it deteriorate. And neither of those options are probably good for you. You also need to have somebody who is trusted. And one of the things that I hear most often from the clients that I work with that are looking to sell their business is they care more about finding a trusted buyer who can afford a fair price than getting the most value out of their business. So they want to see their legacy continue, and it makes sense. So if those things are not met, then obviously you don't have a sale. The buyer options, well, there are some very obvious options. A lot of people say, hey, no sweat, my kids are going to buy me out. Well, 23% of owners do sell to their children. The challenge is maintaining it generationally. So 33% of businesses actually survive to the second generation, 13% to the third, and then 6% survive to the fourth generation. So 41% sell to key employees, or they sell to an ESOP. That's become very popular recently. And then 29% sell to a third-party buyer, somebody outside. It could be private equity or somebody else that they didn't know before they started the sales process. An additional thing that's important to know if you're selling to children or even key employees and family or an ESOP is that it generally takes an average of 3 to 5 years to prepare someone who's a high potential VP level to be the CEO of a company. So you've got to prepare for that time. The other question that often is on people's minds is, what's my business worth? So unfortunately for many companies, it's less than what they expected. So the statistics that I researched said that 16% of companies are worth less than $2 million. 48%, the vast majority, are worth somewhere between 2 and 10 million, and then 36% are worth more than 10 million. Most people that own a business believe that their business is probably worth more than it is. That's the general belief. And the truth is that it's only worth what a buyer is willing and able to pay for it. So the question for owners is, can I get enough? And it's enough from an ego standpoint, it's enough from a what do I want standpoint. But the biggest question is really, is it enough to maintain the lifestyle that you've become accustomed to? And is it realistic? Will someone actually pay that? Other things that business owners often don't think about as much, but is important, is what matters most to enable you to exit on your terms. So the things that I hear that matter most, everyone's going to say sales price. And again, it's because nobody wants to be taken advantage of. The other things that matter is the timing. Some people, I just recently worked with a business owner who was preparing to sell his business. And the first thing that he told me is he'd like to be out in 6 months. Well, 6 months is a pretty aggressive timeline. So if you can't plan for beyond 6 months, you're at risk of selling it for less than what you think it's worth. So the timing matters. You have to have that trusted successor, and most owners want that, as I mentioned before. And then it's about taking care of your employees and exiting well. So a lot of folks that I talk to tell me that they really want to make sure that their employees are taken care of. So even if they're selling to another firm or they're selling to private equity, they spend a lot of time thinking about the culture of the buyer and making sure that the culture of the buyer or the buyer's company is going to be similar enough to their culture that their employees have a smooth transition and that they feel cared for. So I want to talk about some of the hidden aspects, and I've put together the Donnelly method to help explain some of that so we can go through and talk a little bit more about some of the things that maybe as a business owner or as a successor you might not have given a lot of thought to. So the Donnelly method has several components, and I'm going to go through each of those in detail. So the first component is around strategic growth. Every business owner that's selling their business wants to see the business continue and survive, or if not even thrive, under the new ownership. So the strategic growth is really about figuring out what are your strengths. You could do a SWOT analysis for sure, and I often do that when I'm doing a strategic plan with a company. But the strengths and opportunities really show you what the potential is. And so leveraging your strengths and seeking out those growth opportunities is the first phase of that strategic growth process. And then it's thinking through, is your strategy compelling? Does the buyer feel like they can execute that strategy? And will it deliver a profitable, sustainable business, not just today, because you've got a long future ahead, but also in that future? So if you have a strategy, but the new owners can't execute it, that's not going to work. If you have a group of owners or a new owner that can execute that strategy, but it's not going to be sustainable for the future, you've probably got to come up together with a new strategy. You've also got to have a strong, competent management team. I mentioned earlier it takes 3 to 5 years to develop a CEO, and that's starting at a VP position. The reason is that CEOs have a very different role than most VPs. CEOs have to not only be that strategic lens, but they have to balance their look inside the organization and outside the organization. So 76% of successors are not ready. And really, it's about figuring out who's the best choice to run your company versus the default of the expected choice. And these are some of the difficult conversations that I have oftentimes with owners, is helping them figure out really who's the best choice, and then how do they position that person for success, knowing that there's an expected choice that may not be the best fit. So sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable, sometimes they're difficult, but there's always a way to have them, and in most cases, having them right results in very positive outcomes for all. When an owner is trying to figure out how to develop that successor for those next stages, it's all about intentional development. And I'm going to go through a couple of things here to give you some ideas on how you can intentionally develop the people that work for you. And certainly I'm focusing this on the successor, but it doesn't have to only be the successor that you apply this to. It's really anyone in your organization. So the first piece of that process of intentional development is really assessing who's ready now for more responsibility, who can take on a bigger role, who can expand their impact, and then who can be ready in the next 3 years. And we'll talk about high potentials in a moment. The other thing that a lot of companies don't think about, or a lot of owners don't think about, is which roles in your organization are strategic for your business. So for example, if you're a sales-oriented company, and many companies are, then your sales VP role is a strategic role. If your company is operationally focused, the key unique differentiator between your business and others is your operational excellence, then your operations roles are critical. So looking at which roles are critical is an important factor. Looking at the skills and experience that the folks in your organization bring is also a really important factor for you to consider as you're thinking through who do I need to develop. And then of course, it's not the last one, but one of the other key ones is around culture fit. So you may have some fantastic performers in your organization, but if the environment that they would lead in, or the style that they would lead, is culturally different than the style that you have built the company, and it's not a good fit for the future, it may actually be a good fit for the future, but if it's not, then you need to work on either creating a stronger, more adaptable culture to that style, or adjusting the style of the leader that you have in mind. So it's all about creating experience-based development that's very intentional. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean by experience-based development in a couple of slides. So one of the tools that can be really helpful as you, as an owner, are thinking through this is called a 9-box. And the 9-box looks at, it's actually a graph. And on the x-axis, you've got the potential, and on the other axis, you've got the performance. And so you're looking at what's the potential of the key leaders that you've got, and then how is their performance in their current job. And you're looking to figure out, ideally, who's got high performance in their current job and has high potential, because that person is likely to be able to develop and take on way more responsibility. It also starts to surface and highlight who in your organization is probably not a good long-term fit. And those might be people that have low performance today and low potential to grow. And you can see along the two axes, you can look at, you might have some folks that have tremendous potential, but are not doing a very good job in their current role. So it says move them into a role where they can be more successful. You may have some folks that are doing a terrific job in their current role, but probably don't have potential to grow into higher level roles in the organization. Great, then keep them happy in the role that they're doing and keep them engaged. If you can do that, they'll be a wonderful long-term performer for your company. So let's talk about how do you develop that talent. So you see I've got a triangle here, and there's a rule called the 70-20-10 rule. And what that means is that you want to be spending 70% of your development investment in the bottom part of that triangle around experiences. But it's not just giving people experiences. It's really being intentional about giving them stretch assignments, putting them into a job rotation where they get experience in other parts of the company, real experience, like a day in the life or a week in the life. When I worked at Procter & Gamble, we were exceptional at figuring out how do we give people developmental experiences. So we might take a 3-month assignment, that was a stretch assignment, to immerse us in a different part of the company or a different role. We might do a job rotation where we rotate in for a year into another part of the business or into another role. There are pilot projects. I remember being scooped out of my role to work part-time on a pilot project. I probably spent about 10 hours a week on that pilot project, and it gave me phenomenal experience. Things like getting on the leadership of a board. Could be your board, but more likely it might be a board of another organization, maybe a nonprofit that is important to that person. Cross-functional projects give you opportunities, give your folks opportunities to work across the company to pick up skills that they might not have been able to pick up otherwise. Other ideas, and I've got a whole list of ideas on my website. There are a couple of documents that can help you with this if you're looking for more ideas. The last one I have listed here is the peer roundtable. And there are a lot of peer groups for CEOs. There are also peer groups for the next level in the organization, and even some industry-type peer groups, and also role-type peer groups, like CFO peer groups, things like that. So giving someone an opportunity to do something like that broadens their exposure and helps them understand broader business experience as well as what the rest of the business world is like. So the idea there is that you have a strong business strategy, you develop your talent, and then you encourage them to reflect and take new action. Now, of course, the other ways of developing talent, I'm sure that you're all very familiar with. There's coaching and mentoring, and the statistics show, of course, I'm a little biased, I'm a coach, but the statistics show that coaching and mentoring works very well, but it's not right for everyone, and it's not right all the time. So coaching can also be informal coaching that you're doing with your folks or that you have peer coaching staff. And 360s, assessments, things like that can also be good, effective coaching. The last one is formal training. And so that's classroom experience, it could be workshops, it could be anything that takes them out of the office, or at least these days virtual is also another way of getting that. So let's talk about I mentioned the role components and how important those were to look at what drives the roles in your company. First of all, not all executive functions are critical. They're all important to the organization, but not all are critical to that unique competitive advantage that you bring. So I talked earlier about managing operations, maybe leading strategy, selling. In some companies, the marketing and social media aspect of it is what differentiates the business. So you've got to look at your business and figure out which of these drivers are most important for you, and then make sure you've got real strong talent in those roles as a development, either towards the successor or simply as a part of your strong leadership team now and in the future. So let's also talk about the next component of the Donnelly method, and that's implementing sustainable systems. Now we know that systems are important to an organization, but we also know that not all systems are the same. So value drivers, there's been a lot of research done on this, value drivers are the best way to figure out what's going to make your company more valuable, whether you're selling it to a key employee or a family person, or you are selling it to someone outside, a third party. You're still going to want the value of your business to strengthen no matter what. So here are some of the things that show up as important value drivers. The first and most obvious is having strong and clean financials. If you've got those in place, that's probably a good chunk of what it's going to take to make your company more valuable to somebody else. But the other factors that are important are things like having that strong management team. Folks that are buying your company want to know that you've got the bench strength to be able to continue running the business, even if they're going to send in some folks to help run the business with you. Other things that are important are owner independence. If you can take a month of vacation or 3 months of vacation and you don't have to worry what's going on in the company, you've got owner independence. I have a client right now who is able to take off weeks at a time to travel, to take vacation, to do really whatever he would like, because he's got such a strong management team that's leading the company right now. And he's still in his mid-50s. So to think about a business that's that well situated is very exciting. Other things that are important to value from a value driver standpoint are customer loyalty. If you have a long track record, not just of single customer, because that's dangerous, but if you have a very diverse customer base and a long track record of repeat buyers that stay with you forever, that's very attractive to a buyer. Other things include that recurring revenue, and there are a couple of books written by John Morello. One is called Built to Sell, the other is called The Automatic Customer, that I would recommend to help you with some of this value driver information, and also Automatic Customer is all about recurring revenue streams. And really, who wouldn't like recurring revenue streams? I think we all would like our businesses to have those. The last one on the list is scalability. And so your ability to take your business today and ramp it up as you have growth potential is another valuable asset to a buyer. So figuring out your value drivers and where you can invest value today in growing the business for tomorrow, I think is a worthwhile exploration process. So now let's get to some of the other pieces of what happens with business owners. Most business owners have built their business over 20, 30, sometimes 40 years, and their identity is deep in that business. It's like another child to many of them. It's offered them a lot of status, a lot of control. They control their own destiny. It's given them power and autonomy. And so the question when they think about moving on out of the business is, what will I do in this next chapter of my life? Who will I be when I'm not running this company? And oftentimes as leaders transition out of their business, some of the things that I hear from them is, I don't know how to introduce myself as I'm meeting people and I'm no longer the owner of my company. Do I say I used to be the owner or I used to be the CEO? I've got to come up with a new identity. And that's a really important transition. This process of exiting a business is extremely emotional. And I know it's hard to talk about the emotional aspect of it, but if we don't talk about it and we don't deal with it, it has the potential of derailing the process that is otherwise going very, very well, and a win for everybody. So I've built a mechanism, a model, that has worked extremely well with the clients that I've worked with over the last really 15 years. Have a lot of success stories, and I'd like to take you through that model and show you kind of the flow of the process and give you some ideas about things that you can do to start preparing for that. So the whole idea of this model is that as business owners, I know that having a smooth transition is important, but having a smooth transition may not be as easy as often we would like to think it is. And so the part of the process, this process I'm going to take you through, is really a two-stage process, with the third stage that you're in your happy place after you've exited the business or defined a new role for yourself in the business. And that's a critical piece of it. The transition is hard, and it's often made harder when roles are not clearly defined, when decision-making processes and the scope of authority for those decision-making processes are unclear. And there's a little bit of a bid for power going on, because the owner wants to relinquish it, but as I said earlier, but kind of might not. Or they want to relinquish it, but they see a decision being made that they just know is wrong, and they want to jump in. But if they jump in, then it impacts the successor's confidence or their ability to execute upon a new strategic direction that they've discussed already. So it's complicated. So I like to start working with owners at least 6 months before their transition out of their role, even if they're not planning on exiting the business quite yet, because it helps with the emotional aspects of that transition, and it really helps the successor be more successful in that transition. So the first phase of the process is called the discovery process. And it's all internal work. You know, it's a lot of self-reflection, it's a lot of soul searching, it's a lot of thinking about who we are as individuals and what we're passionate about and what we're really best at. So we look at 3 components. You can probably see, if you look closely, that there's a Venn diagram with 3 components. And the first component is around, what are you passionate about? And that's not really about, ooh, I love watching football on TV, that's great. But there are probably a number of other things that every person can figure out that they're passionate about. And I know that if you're listening right now or watching, you may be thinking, but I don't know what I'm passionate about. Most people don't when we start working together. But there are a number of tools that can help to uncover that. One of the exercises that I often ask clients to do is I ask them to think about what are some of the accomplishments that they're proudest of. And they could be accomplishments that they would love to have on the front page of the newspaper, but they might also be accomplishments that are personal victories for them. And so the accomplishments that we're proudest of often have in them seeds of what we're passionate about. And so that's an example of the kinds of questions that I might encourage owners to think about. It's also a really good technique. I use it a lot with folks that I'm working with that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s and are thinking about a career transition. The other question that I like to ask them to consider are, tell me about times when you totally lost track of time. What were you doing? And often that answering that question brings seeds of where there are uncoverable passions. So passion is a pretty important piece of this, because in our next chapter, whether we're going to stay with the company, we're going to change careers, or we're going to exit the business, we want our life to be filled with things that are meaningful and rewarding, and often that has to do with our passions. The second piece of the Venn diagram is around, what are your favorite strengths to use? You know, at this point in your career, you don't have to use the strengths that you don't like anymore. At this point, we want to really focus in on what are your favorite strengths to use? What are the strengths that really light you up? And there are a number of different ways that we can get at that. But one of my favorite ways to get at it, in addition to asking, you know, what are the strengths that you enjoy using the most, is to get some feedback from other people. Talk to some people, not do a 360. I'm not really terribly interested in the things that you don't do well, but really, what are the things that they see you do exceptionally well? What are your hidden or visible talents? What are the things that you do better than anybody else that they know? And sometimes that feedback is confirming and validating, and sometimes it's enlightening. So figuring that out is a critical piece of the process. And then the third piece of the Venn diagram is, what lifestyle priorities are important to you at this stage? A lot of folks tell me that they're really tired of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they'd really like to be able to sleep until maybe 6:30. So that's a lifestyle priority to put into this process. Others tell me they want to be able to travel more. Most people, when I ask, what do you want to do in retirement? I get the same 3 answers. I've done this in front of thousands, literally, of people. And the 3 answers that I get almost all the time are, I want to spend more time with family, I want to travel, and I want to play a lot more golf. Sometimes it's tennis, but usually it's golf. And those things are great, and they ought to be incorporated into a next chapter, but they're often not sufficient to satisfy the vast majority of people. So once we identify those 3 components, then we can start to put together a narrative that starts to frame out what that next chapter might look like. And I don't expect at that point that anyone's really going to know that. But they start to see the components of what that might be. And that leads us to phase 2. They've got that narrative, and in phase 2 of the process, they begin to explore by having conversations with people, by investigating organizations or associations that might be of interest to them, and asking what kind of work is out there, whether it's paid or not, what kind of volunteer work is out there, what kind of opportunities are out there. And when we start to express interest in other areas, not only do we learn a lot more, but other people start to get interested in us as well. And others can start to see the potential that we can bring and want to draw us in. But in drawing us in this way, they start to see what we can bring because we're clear on what we want to do next and the direction we want to go. So the process is, it's very powerful for helping people move into that. And I like to think about it as a fulcrum, because once an owner gets excited about what that next chapter can look like and sees that there is potential, even if they don't have the whole picture lined up, even if they don't know exactly what it's going to be, they can start to see what that potential is. And the more focus that they can get on that potential, the less uncomfortable they are as their successor starts to take over more of the company. And the more confident they get that the company's going to be just fine because they've done all the right work to get them there. So my closing comment is get started now. Don't bury your head in the sand, don't do the rolling 10, but at least start with some baby steps. Start thinking about some of the things that I talked about today and get the process started. So if you're ready for a confidential conversation, certainly I would love to have that conversation with you. My contact information is right here. It's abby@leadershiplegacygroup.com. My phone number is 336-458-9939. And I'd invite you to visit my website. There are some free resources there and some videos and stuff like that. And there's a copy of my book there. I'll hold a copy up here. This book goes through the Donnelly method and a lot of what I talked about today, and will hopefully give you some ideas. It's an easy, quick, and inexpensive way to get started. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank Spartan Planning and Spartan Branding for today. It's a wonderful day. I wish we could have been live and in person. And I look forward to seeing what the rest of the day unfolds. Thank you.
We just wrapped a great session with Abby, and I took several great notes from that. There were two things that really resonated with me extremely powerfully. One was that the decision about succession is deeply emotional, and there's really no way to separate yourself from that. You've put your life's work into something, and you need to be thinking through that, and it's okay for it to be an emotional decision. The second is, and this applies regardless of who you are and where you are in your career, there's going to be a stage in your career where you've got to think about what's next. And understanding that and knowing and thinking ahead and having that purpose clearly figured out in your mind is so powerful, because it removes some of that ambiguity that might be challenging when you are at that stage in your life or in your career. So Abby, thank you for that wisdom, and I'm really looking forward to learning more from you in the future. So next week for Spartan Pro Day, we have a panel that I'm really excited. I get to sit down with David Childs and John Robinson and talk about three things that you never would have thought would have been on a single title slide, which is the impact on the financial markets of a pandemic, an election, and 0% interest rates. And while the nerd in me really geeks out over that, the substantive data and the wisdom that those guys bring to bear is just so cool. The second session next week, I get to sit down and have a conversation with David Lillard regarding how do you as a leader build resiliency in your life and in your organization and in your teams. And it's a lot of fun for me to talk about leadership, so I hope that you will get a lot out of that as well. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors right now: C12, Spartan Planning, Blueprint Investment Partners, and Spartan Branding. Thank you so much. It's because of your contributions that this event is possible. We couldn't be here without you. Thank you.
Hey, I'm David Childs, CEO and Chief Listener at Spartan Planning Group. We're a fee-only boutique wealth management firm. We help successful executives and entrepreneurs make work optional. you happen to be a successful executive or entrepreneur or a leader of your organization. And I think we can add value to you. I think we can help. And so the ways that we help, the ways that we typically engage with folks are we can put a second set of eyes on a portfolio that you have. We can help answer financial planning questions. We can help get clarity and confidence around your goals, working towards retirement, which becomes that work optional. Also, as a business leader, you wear all types of hats. And so if that's just looking at your business finances, if it's looking at a transition opportunity to acquire or maybe sell your business and wanting to know what are the tax consequences of that, we can help you work through all of that. A lot of folks come to us to have us help them with their corporate retirement plan. Maybe they have a 401k or a 403b in place at their company organization right now, and they want a second set of eyes on that. Well, we can do that. If you don't have one, we can help you set one up. So there's all kinds of ways that we can help. Those are a few of the specific ones that we typically can really add value. So if you want a meeting with one of our on your side financial experts, if you want to chat with me about that, you can reach me at david@spartanplanninggroup.com. You can call us at 800-371-1292.
So folks, in just 2 minutes, you're going to go over to our next session, which is a Q&A with some of our panelists. And so be prepared, lean in, send those in via Whova, and we'll see you there.